Hey everybody, it's Party Elite, starting up the Magic Guide once more with our first episode where we're going to discuss the lore of the Little Waaagh. Yes, once again, since the various patches have made quite a difference to the lore, so pretend you've never watched the previous video, imagine it doesn't exist, and plus, we're changing the format a little bit so there's a little bit more to glean with this new series than there was before. Now, the Little Waaagh is only available to the greenskins, and its attribute, Sneaky Stealin, is a good pick when up against opponents you suspect will be relying on the Winds of Magic. With 1 augment, 3 hexes, a magic missile, and a vortex spell, the Little Waaagh is pretty versatile, but shines in a support role rather than a damage-dealing one. Sneaky Stealin siphons Winds of Magic from any enemy casters on the battlefield, reducing power recharge rate, and is great to take in almost every scenario outside of battle against the dwarves. If your opponent is likely to use magic, bring Sneaky Stealin. I could literally list every spell in the game, and Sneaky Stealin would literally reduce how many of them your opponent can use on the field. At a cost of 54 points, there is no reason not to take it, again unless you're up against the dwarves who don't use magic. Sneaky Stabbin is the only augment spell in this lore, but it's a great spell to have on hand, especially when up against armored enemy units. Giving a plus 34 to melee attack and plus 18% to armor-piercing damage, it costs 4 Winds of Magic to cast, has a cooldown of just 22 seconds, and a duration of 15 seconds, affecting any single allied unit. As an example, this can double the melee attack of a unit of Black Orcs and raise their armor-piercing damage to 35 from 30. That means more hits are landing, and they're all causing more damage without a care for enemy armor. In desperate situations, using Sneaky Stabbin on a unit such as your Lord or a Giant is not a terrible idea either, but remember, a higher melee attack doesn't mean attacks are landing quicker, only more often. Animation speeds still come into play here. And make sure you cast it on units that are already getting some damage through at least. A boost to melee attack, again, just means hits are getting through more often, but if they're not causing damage, the boost does little to help beyond a bit more armor-piercing damage. In other words, help an anti-large unit fighting large units before you help non-anti-large units fighting large units. With its low cost to cast and a quick cooldown time, Sneaky Stabbin can be used repeatedly on the battlefield in crucial engagements to help turn a flank and to put out more damage at crucial moments. With its cost of just 52 points, it should always be taken to the field in my opinion, and is especially helpful against typically armored enemies such as dwarfs and warriors of chaos. Icky Nuisance and Sneaky Stabbin make an excellent combination against all potential opponents and can help win core engagements, allowing you to punch through flanks with relative ease, or at least hold them as your soldiers wait for the metaphorical cavalry to arrive. Remember to cast this as soon as or just a moment before engagements begin to get maximum use out of its relatively short duration. Vindictive Glare is the Little Waagh's little magic missile spell, costing 6 Winds of Magic to cast or 11 to overcast for twice as many projectiles, with a range of 250 meters and a cooldown of 24 seconds. It isn't extremely accurate. It launches 5 projectiles, 10 when overcast, that cause 165 points of damage and result in an explosion that deals a further 150 damage to a small area around the impact. Keep in mind that Vindictive Glare fires in a straight line, so make sure there aren't any hills, rocks, or allies between your caster and your target. Usually, it's a good idea to fire Vindictive Glare from a higher point on the battlefield. There is no armor-piercing damage here, so don't waste time trying to hit anything with decent armor. It can be used to pick out enemy casters, generals, or large units as well, but while Vindictive Glare can have its uses on the battlefield, the Winds of Magic and the 54 or 58 points of cost are better used elsewhere more often than not. Gorkel Fixit is the first hex in the Little Waaagh, needing only 7 Winds of Magic to cast, but with a long 43-second cooldown. It lasts 21 seconds and affects all enemies within 40 meters of where it's cast, whether that be on an enemy unit or the ground, and it reduces their speed, charge bonus, and vigor. While Gorkel Fixit can be used to reduce the effectiveness of an enemy charge, it can also be used to shut down fast enemy units so that your own slower units can close the gap to slaughter the enemy unit or maintain one and run away, and it can be used to try and hold enemy generals and casters in place. If you suspect your opponent will be sending their lord into melee often, you can use Gorkel Fixit to prevent their easy escape, bait them with an easy target, hit them with Gorkel Fixit, surround them, and prevent them from taking off, literally and metaphorically. Be absolutely sure before you cast it, however, as the 43-second cooldown time is no joke, and using the spell at the wrong time can be the difference between winning an engagement and losing a battle. The 119 or 122 point cost is a bit on the higher side, but there is a great deal of utility for those who are quick with their spell work. Don't take this spell though if you're not quick with your magic micromanagement. The value of this spell is heavily dependent on being able to spot and react to situations within seconds. Also, don't bother taking this spell against armies that are typically slow, like dwarfs, where you'll gain very little, relatively speaking. The Empire, Bretonnia, and Wood Elves are examples of good factions to take this against in order to pin down their generals and cavalry. Itchy Nuisance is the more commonly seen hex with an 8 Winds of Magic cost to cast, a 44-second cooldown, and the ability to reduce enemy weapon damage by 22% and melee attack by 34% to any enemy unit within 40 meters of where it was cast for 20 seconds. That is something that can easily turn the tide of an entire flank and as a result, an entire battle. The negative 34 to melee attack will reduce many units' stat right down to 0. Even some lords would be brought down to 0 or low enough to hit the lowest possible chance to hit of just 10%, depending on the opposition's melee defense, of course. And any of those hits that do go through have their damage reduced by nearly a quarter. Remember that the second reduction is percentage based. That means you're better off targeting enemy clumps that also have heavy hitting damage dealing units embedded among them. Use Itchy Nuisance to keep your outclassed units alive as they wait for support to arrive. Even if they aren't able to cause damage to the enemy, having Itchy Nuisance active in the area means that the enemy isn't getting any damage through either, for the most part. You have to be very picky about where to cast Itchy Nuisance, as casts are at a minimum 44 seconds apart. Once again, combined with Sneaky Stabbin, the average greenskin unit can take care of most potential threats, and you can use this as an element of surprise. If the opponent feels overconfident about a particular engagement, not providing it with enough support or resources, surprise them with this combination of spells, make quick work of that engagement, and now you've got some free units to start an envelopment maneuver. With a cost of 117 or 121 points, I'd say you should always take Itchy Nuisance to the field. Remember to cast this just as soon as an engagement begins, rather than as you charge in. That way you maximize your 20 seconds of Itchy Nuisance. Nightshroud is a hex that we don't often see on the field. It costs 9 Winds of Magic to cast, with a cooldown of 63 seconds, and it hits all enemy units within 75 meters of where it was cast, with a 96% reduction to visibility and a negative 30% to accuracy. It lasts for 57 seconds, and when overcast, the Winds of Magic needed goes up to 15, but the range increases to 100. This can be used to keep your army safe from an enemy that has gone heavy on artillery, or it will allow for some sneaking around in the early stages of the battle. With a cost of 188 or 192 points, however, there really is no point in taking this spell for what will almost always be used once or never on the field. Curse of Debod Moon is a vortex spell that costs 14 Winds of Magic to cast with a cooldown of 55 seconds. It lasts for 26 seconds, can be cast on the ground, and floats around causing magical damage and hitting targets with the nasty Curse, a 26-second debuff that reduces melee attack by 34, armor by 30, and speed by 24%. Overcast, it costs 21 Winds of Magic to cast and doubles the duration of the vortex and its debuffs to 52 seconds. It's a larger, slower moving vortex when overcast, but whether overcast or not, it can change its direction by up to a full 90 degrees every 0.8 seconds. That means within 1 second, the vortex could veer off and barely hurt the enemy. A waste of 193 to 208 points in my opinion, and I'd say don't bother taking it to the field. It's also prohibitively expensive to cast. The Little Waaagh has a great set of spells that offer tactical benefits on the field. If you're up against it, prepare to use Foe Seeker to counter the speed debuff on your characters from Gorkel Fixit, and Stand Your Ground, Stand or Die, or Undeath Resurgent and such abilities for help against the enemy boosting melee attack and armor-piercing damage from Sneaky Stabbin. Naturally, you can use magic to counter this as well. If you're able to pull away from zones hit by Itchy Nuisance, you should do so, as most units are completely useless combatants under the hex. If not, and it's a valuable engagement, use magic of your own to reduce enemy melee defense, but don't boost your melee attack to counter the hex unless you can also boost weapon damage. A negative 22% is a huge loss, especially if you're wasting resources to maintain a higher melee attack. And that covers the Little Waaagh, a lore with a name that hides its true potential. I don't recommend most of the spells here, but Sneaky Stabbin and Itchy Nuisance are extremely effective and powerful spells, and Gorkel Fixit can be very valuable in the right hands. The Lords of Magic are just another set of tools on the battlefield. You need to make sure you take the right tools for the job and use them well, because that's what being a great general is about. As always, for more Total War content, including updates to this Magic Guide miniseries, make sure you subscribe to this channel. Have any interesting Magic-related thoughts or strategies of your own? Let me know in the comments below.